Okay. Hey, everybody. Can y'all hear me okay? Hopefully you can. As you're coming in, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please, 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 please let me know if you can hear me. So, welcome back. Happy new moon. Happy solar eclipse. So, we are in the midst of a solar eclipse. Yes, it is before noon. We are only just 5 minutes late. We are rolling in hot. Like I said, happy new moon in Aries. My name is Jasmine, and this is Flourish Homestead and Apothecary. And we are African and indigenous collective that focuses on self healing, energy work, rerouting and reconnecting to our ancestry, to our culture, to the earth. To Mother Earth. And oftentimes we do that through astrology, we do that through energy work, we do that through urban gardening, urban farming, and we also do that through astro herbalism. Today, we are going to be focusing on the mindset, the shadow work, the root work part. So, um, that anytime we're talking about any sort of astrological work, we deep dive here. So, number one, we are making a couple of upgrades. Number one, if you're seeing this video, hopefully you are one of the few people who've been rocking with Flourish Homestead and Apothecary since the moment we opened in 2022, actually doing astrological readings. And we started off on other platforms, and now we have made our way over here. And here we are 3 years later, and with the advice and many, many, many years worth of work, I am so happy to say, and I can say this during a Mercury and a Venus retrograde, that we are launching our very first workbook. Now, I just want to say it's a soft launch, number one. It is a soft launch. And not only is it a soft launch, because it is Venus and Mercury in a retrograde, right? It is a soft launch because it is just us working through the Aries new moon and the solar eclipse. It does not have any other information about primarily what is going on during Aries season, which would be the Libra full moon in 2 weeks. Okay, so because of that, and because we honor our ancestors around here and too many things been free, unfortunately, this soft launch is not free, but if you click the link, it is $10. Come tour season, our workbooks are going to have to go up to their market value of about $22. So please take this workbook. It is 34 pages of in-depth work. Again, you do not have to work with all 34 pages, but overall, it is a very good way to work with Aries energy. It is one of the things that I am so very proud of, and I'm just happy to talk more about it. But y'all don't need to hear me talk more about it. We are about to launch right into the presentation. I will be toggling between two slides. And as you can see, I'm also holding a microphone and I will be reading my notes off of my computer. So in advance, because this is a new style, y'all, give me grace. Give me a lot of grace, okay? All righty. So I'm going to toggle back over and we're going to go ahead and get started. So, like I said, this is the new moon correspondence and also the correspondence for the solar eclipse that is also taking place, because solar eclipses can only take place during new moons. And we're going to jump right into it. So, what can we expect during this Aries new moon, and how can we expect to work with the energy? Okay. So, working with Aries energy, you're working with the first house energy. It's the youngest of the zodiac. So oftentimes when you're working with any Aries energy during new moons and full moons, the people that it typically will impact the most is if you have Aries in your big six. Okay. So the big six is your sun, your moon, your rising, your Mercury, your Venus. I always forget one, so I'll make sure I have my notes. Nope, I got it. Sun, moon, rising, Venus, Mars. Oh, Mars and Mercury, right? And so that'll be the people who are most impacted if you have Aries energy in your big six, okay? But also, if you are experiencing any Aries energy in your progress chart, in your natal chart, it doesn't even have to be in your big six. This moment in time is big for you. But just overall, because the collective moment is requiring us to sit with a lot of Aries energy, energy, and we've been sitting in that energy since about 2023 or 2021 when Chiron moved into Aries. This is now just a really big moment to work with Aries energy, specifically since it is an eclipse. And this is a solar eclipse that is actually ending out a 12-year eclipse cycle. In March 2025. So those are the things that we are going to be focusing on here today. All right. So now we are going to jump right into the celestial landscape, all right, for March 2025. So again, we are only covering the new moon. So that is the first 2 weeks of Aries season. And one of the big things that happened was we had the spring equinox. We had the spring equinox about a week ago. And now we are at the 29th, which is today, and we had our solar eclipse in Aries at 9 degrees and 0 minutes. So, as we know, a new moon is when the moon and the sun are together in the same zodiac. And that's in Aries, and it takes place at 9 degrees, right? And it is also hyper concentrated in the 12th house. So, in addition to Aries, or in addition to the sun and the moon being in Aries, and also this eclipse that's closing out the nodal energy, we also have today Neptune moving into Aries for the next 14 years. In addition to that, we now have a Pisces stellium. So, what is a stellium? A stellium is when 4 or more celestial bodies are in one zodiac or constellation, right? And so our zodiac stellium that we have in Pisces is Mercury. So Mercury is actually cusp. So like yesterday, it was literally in Aries, and now it has moved into late degrees Pisces. And it is now in the 11th house. We also have Saturn. Saturn is in Pisces. It's getting ready to move into Aries later this year, also in the 11th house. It's also in late degrees. We have Neptune, which is at 29 degrees of Pisces right now. And like I said, later today, it is getting ready to move into Aries. Okay. And then the last one, we have our North Node. So in January 2025, the North Node just went into Aries and will be there for like 18 more months, right? So yeah, that's a lot of the energy that's taking place. And again, the North Node and all of that Pisces energy is taking place in the 11th house. Some things that are coming up that we might want to take into consideration also is that Mars is in Cancer. So Mars is the planetary ruler for this new moon, and it is currently in a debilitated state in Cancer. Alrighty, so let's move on. We've already talked about most of these things. It's just reiterating again that Aries season started on March 20th, 2025, which is also the spring equinox. But back in January 20th, 2025, our North Node's transition from the North Node being in Aries to the North Node being in Pisces. Then fast forward to today, which is March 29th, we have a solar eclipse that took place at 6:58 this morning. So it just passed a couple hours ago at 9 degrees Aries. Okay. And like I just said, today in a couple of hours, we will be starting basically a new spiritual cycle with Neptune going into Aries, leaving its domicile of Neptune, which has been in since 2012. Ooh, that was so long ago and such a memorable year for me. But I will not get into it. Okay. So I guess we will just spend a little time and understand everything that's going on. So when we're talking about the North Node that was in Aries but transitioned to Pisces in January 2025, we're really talking about closing out what are the lessons that you learned during the 18 months that the North Node was in Aries. And a lot of the things that we learned about centered around self-expression and also personal courage. So these are cycles that we should be completing, wrapping up, and getting the wisdom out of, since this is things that we have been working on since January 2022. Okay. Like we talked about, Aries season always begins with the spring equinox, and it is typically a time for bringing in fresh new energy and fresh new beginnings, just like what spring is known to represent. Okay. And again, today we have the solar eclipse at 9 degrees and 0 minutes Aries. And this is bringing in a lot of that transformative energy that typically takes place during spring, anyways, but even more so exemplified by how close it is taking place to the spring equinox. Like we just talked about, Neptune will enter Aries in a couple of hours. And really, this is beginning a new cycle that kind of blends mysticism. So, all of the one consciousness, the searching, the investigating that we were doing, and kind of putting it into action. But also, with this transition of Neptune moving into Aries, it's really about your own spiritual systems, your own spiritual values, your own spiritual action, but also your spiritual boundaries, because Chiron is still in Aries, right? So it's asking us about our boundaries, specifically our personality and our psychological boundaries, with Aries and Chiron being together right until like 2025, 2026. So this energy will be even more enhanced by causing you to take action around what are your personal passions? What's your individualized life purpose? Like, why are you here? Why are you breathing? Why did the universe take all of these moments to make the perfect moment of finding you, parents, bringing you down, calling you down? You have life in you today. And how do you turn that into action orientation and actually live in your life's purpose? Alrighty. All right, I'm going to check back in just to see how everything is going. I still think, yeah, it seems like everything is going just fine. Alrighty. So we are going to hop right back into the presentation. Okay, so the key element of Aries that we're going to be focusing on this new moon is the ram. So the ram historically represents determination, it represents leadership, and it represents just the headstrong energy that we typically know to be Aries, right? Fire energy, with there being so much fire energy that is taking place in this new moon, fire will rule this new moon. And so with fire energy, fire brings about passion and creativity, but also the energy of alchemy, of transformation, of transmutation, which is also indicative of the spring equinox and also Aries season being the initiator of the zodiac, the first of the zodiac, which is initiating new beginnings and new forms of life. And lastly, our ruling planet, as we've already talked about, is Mars. Mars typically governs things in our natal chart like action, our desire, our courage, our warrior spirit, our aggression, our directness, but also like our sexual prowess, right? So these will be the things that will really be the key elements that we're going to talk about more so in this full moon, or in this new moon, my bad, y'all. All right. And so, in order to understand how to harness the full power of this new moon, we really need to understand this from a couple of different perspectives. Number one, that it's just not a regular new moon. It's a new moon and a solar eclipse. As previously stated, solar eclipses can only take place during new moons, right? And today ours went direct at 6:58 p.m. and 9 degrees Aries, right? So as we've talked about, the planetary ruler for this moon is Mars. Mars is currently in Cancer, where it is experiencing debilitation right now. And so there could create a dynamic where you have to reevaluate your emotional intelligence and your motivation around your emotional intelligence. So, what does all of this mean? It means oftentimes Aries in Cancer are both cardinal energies, and they're known for being impulsive, the need to initiate, the need to react. But with so much fire energy, with so much Aries energy, with so much cardinal energy, that initiator energy, one of the things that might come up right now and understanding how to navigate through this eclipse is understanding that the planetary ruler is in a debilitated state that also deeply impacts our emotions, given that Cancer is the initiator of emotions in our zodiac. So pay attention to, what are you emotionally motivated to do right now? You might be surprised by what you find out with all of this Aries energy, but also with that unique perspective of the planetary ruler of this new moon being debilitated, right? As we talked about with this eclipse, we are also ending a cycle that took place over the course of 18 months from 2022 up until January 2025. And it was on the Aries Libra axis, which is called the axis of relationships, right? And so this is a very important cycle that's closing out, because again, it will not be highlighted again for another 12 years. When you're working with nodal energy, you're also working with every other time that the moon and the sun were in this same position. And so the moon and the sun were in very similar positions in 1987, 2004, 2006, 2013, and 2020, or two. Oh, I'm sorry about that. 2014. So think back to those time periods, kind of understand what were some of the themes that were going on in your life. Pay attention to some of the themes that you feel like you might be cycling out of and leveling up in and gaining wisdom in, because some of those lessons might have been learned from those previous times when there was nodal activity, with Aries either being in the north node or south node, right? And so the highlight for this Aries eclipse is making sure that you're being ultra intentional, making sure that you're using that initiator energy, that first house energy, that it been the first sign of the zodiac, it been the youngest, and that cardinal energy, and being hyper intentional about the seeds, about what you're calling down during this new moon. Because with this eclipse, with Neptune being here and staying here until like 2039, the energy that is taking place right now will be energy that sticks with you. The mustard seeds that you plant right now, the mindsets, the habits, the intentions that you have right now will be things that could last you, or could be something that you'll have to deal with up until 2039. Okay. So just wanted to hyper emphasize that. Want to come back to the screen, make sure everything is all good. We are all good. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Alrighty, y'all. So, as you know, in order to work with the new moon, you are not just working with the moon as a celestial body, you are working with the sun and the moon. So, in order to understand how to work specifically with the sun and the moon during a new moon and a solar eclipse, we're just going to spend a little bit of time understanding, how does the moon work. So, the moon is a celestial body that's called a natural satellite. It is Earth's only natural satellite that is caught in our gravitational pull, right? And it is typically located between 226,000 to 239 miles away from Earth. And the wonderful part about the moon is that it stabilizes and regulates our climate, our weather, and our seasons, okay? From an astrological perspective, the moon represents feminine energy, receptive energy. It also represents our emotions and our innermost world. It's governed by Cancer and the fourth house. And it typically rules over, and what I mean, the fourth house rules over home and security within the housing portion of our natal charts or our progressive charts. Okay. And one of the things that we want to highlight about the lunar cycle is the lunar cycle typically lasts about 28 days when you round up. In all actuality, it's about 27.3 days in each portion of the moon cycle, no matter if it's a new moon, a full moon, uh, waxing gibbous, waning gibbous, last quarter, first quarter moons are always a reflection of how much of the sun's light is reflecting off the portion of the moon that is facing Earth, right? And during new moons, the sun and the moon are on the same side or in the same zodiac or constellation. Okay. So we're also going to learn about the sun, right? Because the sun has an astronomical and an astrological perspective, and it plays just as much a role in the lunation cycle as the moon does. The moon just grounds things down because it is the closest celestial body to Earth. Okay. So our solar system, as we know, rotates around the sun. The sun is a yellow dwarf star that is about 4.5 billion years old. Um, it is about approximately, I think, 93 million miles away from Earth, and it generates all of the light and the heat within our solar system that is imperative for life to exist. Okay. And it makes up about 99% of the mass in our solar system, but it is like only one of, I think, maybe 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. Okay. From an astrological perspective, the sun represents our life force, it represents our personality, our sense of individuality, and even our ego. And oftentimes, it'll be the energy that you will learn to grow into in this lifetime. Your natal sun sign will be the energy that you will learn to grow into as you grow older through expressing your personality and your individuality more. And some even believe that the sun represents your inner child when you are properly nourished and you're properly cared for. Okay. And so oftentimes the sun is represented, as we know, by Leo energy and the fifth house energy, which is the house of creativity, romance, and children. Oftentimes, Sundays are the days that the sun governs, as we know, by being called Sunday. Some of the colors that you can work with, if you're going to work from an astrological perspective, is gold, as a metal, but also as a literal color. If you do altar work, if you do candle work, if you do embodiment work where you wear colors to embody any energy. Okay. So I think that's enough for that. We're just going to move on to the new moon and how we work with it together. And then my notes, of course, got all tangled up. So, again, as we've said, from an astronomical perspective, when we're working with the new moon, we are always working with the sun and the moon being conjunct to one another, right? That means they are literally in the same constellation at the same degrees, but typically conjunctions means 5 degrees or less. Okay. And so to understand what a new moon is from an astronomical perspective, it's just where the sun or where Earth or where the moon is caught between the sun and the earth in a position where none of the sun's light can reflect off of the part of the moon that's facing Earth. Okay. And like I said, historically, new moons are known for times for setting intentions, for being very intentional about your prayers, your meditations, what you would like to call down, or what you would like to work on during this lunation cycle. Okay. Oop, I have to mute because I have to cough, y'all. 1 second. I, of course, didn't get no water. Alrighty. And we are back. Okay. So typically how you work with new moons when you're talking about rituals, when you're talking about practice, is typically a time to connect with your own energy or with action-oriented energy. And so typically it's a time for self-care, it's a time for shadow work, it's a time for candle work, it's a time for prayer, it's a time for meditation, it's a time for vision boarding. It's also a time to do ancestor veneration because ancestral veneration is its most powerful during new moons. If you practice hoodoo, you know that in hoodoo, new moons are more important than full moons. And that is because the sun and the moon are very close to one another. So it is a very good time to do the behind the scenes intention setting before you call down physical things. It is a time to plan. Is it a time to be mindful? It is a time to, I won't necessarily say dream because a lot of times dreaming can be reserved for full moons. But it is a time to make the plans to the dreams around the clarity that you got during the full moon. Okay. So oftentimes, traditionally, this is a time where people do manifestation work, invocation work, calling things down, root work, conjuring work, if you're in the hoodoo traditions. Okay. And so typically, some of the things that you might do during new moons is to work with crystals such as moonstone and selenite or even lavender, work with aromatherapy such as like rosemary or lemon, which are very invigorating, citrus scents, which are very good for new moons, but also collecting new moon water. And there are different types of new moon water that you can collect, but that's a different story for a different day. Alrighty. And so some of the things typically, like I said, during new moons, I just want to reiterate that you could do is journaling. So that's a type of shadow work, creating a simple altar in reverence to your ancestors. If you don't have a permanent one, you can also make one to your head or to your ori. You can also make one to source, God, or creator, and highlight Aries elements on that altar. It is a really good time for candle work at an altar or a candle meditation where you look at the candle and visualize or deeply think or pray or hyper focus to call things down on while you're physically looking at the candle. If you're going to do that, the candle meditation, it might be good to say some portions of the meditation out loud. Okay. And another one will be visualizing your desires. I think we've already talked about all of that. Yep, we talked about the aromatherapy and everything else. So we're just going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so as I talked about, every Aries season begins with the spring equinox. The equinox takes place 2 times a year when both the day and night are equal, taking place in March and September. So March is the spring one, September is the fall equinox. And the reason why we have an equinox is because Earth sits at a 23.5 degree tilt, right, which causes our seasonal shifts. That tilt is better known as our equator, right? And every time we have the spring equinox and thus Aries season, we also have the beginning of the astrological new year because we know that the zodiac resets during Aries season. All right. So I think we talked about everything. Yep, we've talked about the sun's alignment and the equator. So we are going to move on to understanding some basics about this eclipse that's taking place during Aries season. Okay. So typically, as we just talked about, if and we talked about during the full moon that eclipses are either partial or complete obstructions of a celestial body. This one that took place at 6:58 a.m. was considered a partial eclipse. Okay, as we just talked about, eclipses typically only take place 2 times a year, coinciding with the spring and the fall equinox, and also with the nodes, right? So this was the last of the nodal activity that will take place for 12 years with the North Node being in Aries. And we know that transitioned out of Aries in 2025 and into Pisces in January of 2025. Sorry, y'all, I'm getting tongue tied. And as we know, this one, like we said, is a solar eclipse. And we know that solar eclipses can only take place during new moon. And solar eclipses are when the moon passes between the sun and the earth during new moons. Okay. And so historically, new moons and thus solar eclipses are known as a time for transformation. Typically, this transformation is known for sticking around for a little while, at least like between 3 and 6 months. And especially with this Aries energy and so much Aries energy, this specific transformation is also sort of like a portal around new beginnings, a portal around certain activations, specifically when we're talking about our spirituality, our action, how we heal, and how we empower ourselves, right? And like we just talked about, with this being an eclipse, this will be ending energy, or you have the opportunity to wrap up cycles that may have been around or in your life or relationships since 1987. Also, 2006, more specifically, because on those two dates of March 29th, 1987 and March 29th, 2006 was also the last time that there was a new moon eclipse at exactly 9 degrees Aries. Okay. So some of the things that you should be focusing on right now is kind of hyper focusing on um, understanding how to use this eclipse to close out that nodal Aries energy from the North Node being in Aries, and kind of seeing it as the final activation on that Libra Aries axis for about 12 years, right? And so, kind of highlighting some of the things around personal development that were kind of brought up and focused on since 2022. And a lot of that energy focused around your boundaries, again, with Chiron also being in Aries during that time period, your psychological triggers, especially during times of stress. We're going to get more into that. So I'm actually not going to jump too deep, too deep off in that right now. I don't know why I can't talk all of a sudden. I think it's because I'm trying like a new method and it's really getting me caught up, y'all. Okay. Then I want to make sure. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, we are all good. I still think, yeah, I think we're all good, y'all. Okay, we are going back to the slide. Okay, so in addition to it being eclipse season, here is how this specific eclipse will be taking place. So the primary focus during this spring eclipse 2025 should be on areas around transformation, around self identity. If you're going to focus on anything during this time period, it is making sure you're closing out the axis of relationships, specifically around self identity, that first house energy of Aries that were particularly lit up while the North Node was in Aries. So, like I said, about 35% of this should be your primary focus. And during this time period, you should be kind of understanding some areas of transformation that have already occurred or in the process of occurring, and in your opinion, are very close to completion. Okay. Outside of that, with Venus and Mercury being in retrograde, the additional 25% will also be hyper focused on your external relationships, because it is also closing out some of the energy that was kind of closed out from the Virgo full moon, which was also a lunar eclipse and a blood moon. So it was a total eclipse, right? Kind of highlighting some of the areas and the lessons in relationships and relationship boundaries that you should have learned while the South Node was in Pisces. The other half will more so focus on Neptune entering Aries, okay? And it will focus on the personal transformation that will be taking place as you are transitioning your spiritual work, your spiritual focus to being more action oriented, more masculine, more presenting outside of yourself, but also making sure that you are very, very clear about what your beliefs are, what your spiritual needs are, what your spiritual desires are, and what your spiritual beliefs are, even if they go against what the collective might be doing. Like the literal point of Neptune being in Aries is for you to become very close and very clear with your own intuition in order to expand your spiritual growth. Okay. Another area that you can focus on right now is career paths, right? So Mercury is in retrograde, and we have a couple of other things that kind of impact that. So this is a really good time to really call down energy if you're looking to change your career life within the next 3 to 6 months, especially before we have the next eclipse season that's taking place in September. Okay. And also, this is a time period to really focus on certain forms of health. So, Aries governs the first house, which governs the head, the brain, and the face. So, this will be a lot about how you take care of your mental health during stress, because now is a very stressful time period in the world. And so, how do you handle that stress? How do you handle those psychological triggers? And how do you take action to make sure that your mental, your psychological health, that first house energy, the house of self, does not become deleterious to your goals during this time period? All right. Okay. So, the Aries zodiac is a real place. It is a constellation. This constellation is best viewed in December nights around 9 p.m. Okay, that is the best time to see the Aries constellation. The Aries constellation only has about 6 stars, and they're very, very dim. So, overall, it is very, very hard to see the Aries constellation outside of that time period in December. And the reason why you're able to see Aries during that time period is typically because when you have basically when we are in the opposite zodiac season, so when we're close to the other half of the zodiac wheel, you're able to see basically the constellations in the sky opposite very, very clearly. I hope that that made sense. Let me know if it did or didn't in the comments. Also, during this time period, or when we're talking about the Aries constellation, just to give you a better viewpoint, right, of where it is, Aries is positioned between like several other constellations. We have Taurus, which is the constellation that is to the east, right? The east of Aries constellation. And we also have Pisces. We just left Pisces season, so it is to the west, right? Or to the left of the Aries constellation. And the Aries constellation is like, I think about 180 light years away from our solar system or the Milky Way. Don't directly quote me because I don't remember, but it is at least 180 light years away from either our Milky Way or our solar system. And it's relatively small, right? It only covers about 441 square feet. And like I said, it only has about 9, not 6 major stars in the constellation, which makes it very, very faint. And it's also one of the smallest. It ranks 39th out of the 88 known constellations that we currently have, or that we currently have studied here from Earth. And just the mythology about the Aries constellation and how it got its name. What we commonly know and how we know it to be called Aries is because of Greek mythology and kind of the golden ram energy or the golden fleece energy. So please look more so into Greek mythology and honestly Roman mythology to a certain degree. But if you've heard anything about the golden fleece, about the golden ram, and about Jason, then you've pretty much heard about the Aries constellation already. And again, it represents just new beginnings, courage, and pioneering spirit is what the ram is supposed to represent. And also, yeah, we'll just talk more about the ram in a second. So we'll get there. Okay. So the elements and modality of Aries is fire, right? And so, one of the key things that we talked about during this new moon is that this will be very, very fire heavy, right? And so this energy is known for being very zealous, very enthusiastic, but Aries energy in fire form can also be very self disciplined. Fire energy overall represents intuition, but especially with the cardinal element also being here, because it is the initiator in that cardinal energy, it also represents creativity, right? So, fire energy overall represents creativity, but specifically when we are talking about Aries and Leo energy, okay? And again, it has that initiator relationship. So, that initiator relationship kind of hovers over leadership, initiation, like the initiation to life, ambition, that pioneering spirit, but also the ability to say that I'm going to start something, even if it has a hard time following through with them, because again, Aries energy isn't fixed or mutable, it's cardinal, it's initiating. And so when you combine this energy together, it creates a powerful, motivating energy that excels. Beginning new cycles like we are in spring right now, and like we're closing out this eclipse, but it's a solar eclipse, which oftentimes calls in new energy, even if we're closing out a cycle that won't take place again for 12 years, right? And so, just to give you more information about cardinal energy, this is it. And like we talked about with Cancer energy, with Mars, the planetary ruler, being in its debilitated state in Cancer right now, we can see that Aries and Cancer do have things in common, as in they're the initiators of the zodiac. But Aries is known for being action oriented and new beginnings, starting life, and then Taurus hunkers in the life because it's fixed energy. But Cancer really hunkers in the emotional connection, the nurturing component, what really makes life, like our emotional connections, our familial connections, right, that we have. And then we have Capricorn energy, or the winter cardinal energy, which is also about initiating structure and achievement, and using that very Saturnian energy to turn all of this initiation that we had previously into something that's viable and something that can withstand time and turn into tradition. And then you have Libra, or fall initiating energy, which is all about the initiation of relationships, that we have to interact with people in this lifetime, and therefore we have to have balance between ourselves and our relationships in order to have a healthy life. I'm looking at my notes really, really fast just to see if there's anything else that I wanted to do. And let me tell y'all, like that rune right there, that Capricorn rune, it really annoys me because it's the rune for structure. But I don't really believe in runes, and I'm being extra picky right now. So I just thought, I just thought I'd tell y'all that. Anyways, so we're going to talk more about Mars, the planetary ruler. As we know, the planetary ruler, like I just said, is in its debilitated state in Cancer. But ugh, I might need some water, but I'm gonna try to make it through this. But it is known historically as the planet of war. It is named after the Roman god of war. And its symbolism typically represents things like courage, action, direction, initiation, assertiveness, directness. And like I said, sex energy or root chakra energy is oftentimes very much so represented in Aries energy. And so when we think about Aries energy, it's really here to highlight the masculine or the yang energy, the action oriented energy for expression and the need to find purpose outside of itself. And it's really here to represent like the action and the initiation that we will do in our outward facing lives. Okay. And sorry about that, y'all. I thought my computer was about to cut off, but I just forgot to put on my proper notifications, like on silent. Also, when we're talking about understanding Aries or Mars's influence on this Aries new moon right now, we are really talking about identifying areas of your life where you might feel competitive, courageous, or really, really strong, fiery energy that is typically associated with Aries energy. And oftentimes we can feel that in our bodies. We can feel that when we're kind of doing shadow work, when we're doing journaling. A lot of times those emotions kind of come up for us. Hold on, y'all, I have to cough because trying to fight and not have no water. Okay. And we already talked about Aries being debilitated in Cancer, and it might highlight the more emotional aspects of where like your emotional motivations might be. But understand that you are, if you are going to work with the energy of this new moon and planning intentions, you are technically working with Mars in its debilitated state, and you are basically working on balancing out your emotions versus your actions. So making sure your emotions don't overwhelm you to the point where you are immobile, or like never stopping to also do the strategizing portion that you're supposed to do in order to like call things down or will things into action. So the planetary house ruler of this new moon is the first house, which is known as the house of self. Like Aries, it is the first house in the zodiac wheel, and typically the house, it represents a lot of energy when it comes to identity, your self-awareness, your also your personal beginnings. A lot of times your first house is the house where your ascendant is in, so it represents how people perceive you. It also might represent your instincts. A lot of times the instincts that you might not even be aware of because of the connection between the 12th house and the first house cusp. Typically, this first house energy is very exemplified in Aries energy in the mantra I am. So that is the phrase or the mantra that is represented in Aries energy. And overall, it kind of helps us identify how we present to the world. Okay. And during this time period, with everything going on, just understand that we will be talking about in this new moon a lot about self perception with all the energy that's kind of hyper concentrated in Aries right now. But in our 12th house, right? In 12th house kind of governs our unconscious behavior, our unconscious motivations. But when you have historically first house energy there, it typically will help you get a better understanding around parts of yourself that you might have had a hard time perceiving or a hard time understanding about yourself. And typically, it has a way of creeping up when you have that 12th house, first house energy kind of working like you have right now during this new moon. Okay. And some of the other things that you can really work on if you're working on first house energy, or if you're kind of working on understanding self perception or self identity better with all this Aries energy, is understanding leadership. Aries represents natural leadership due to his initiating abilities. And so, oftentimes, this can be an area where you can look to better understand your self perception naturally, or understanding your personality traits more naturally by understanding where you take charge, understanding where you get fired up, understanding where you have a pioneering spirit, and kind of understanding where like you don't need direction. You kind of already know where to go because it's kind of built in you. And so that would be the best way to kind of understand how to work with the first house energy being the house ruler for this new moon. All right. Okay. So we are getting into some of the correspondence of Aries before we begin to talk about more of the astrology. So typically, when you're working with Aries energy, you're working with vibrant, radiant colors such as red, yellow, orange, scarlet, white, or pink. Keep in mind, white is a universal color, so it actually represents all the zodiac colors. Some of the gemstones you can work with if you're really looking to work with Aries energy during this Aries new moon and solar eclipse is diamonds, bloodstone, red jasper, ruby, or garnet. Honestly, on a good day, you can't catch me if I'm leaving my house without bloodstone and red jasper and garnet around my neck for the root chakra, Aries protective, purifying energy that it really brings, and making sure that my aura stays okay and my aura stays mine, and just overall protective energy when I'm using that. So I just wanted to highlight that and say that you can also work with metal during Aries season. So or not metal, you can work with iron, particularly as the metal for Aries season. So again, it represents like self-direction, it represents being strong, it represents being bold, but it also represents that purifying element, um and that cleansing element. Some of the herbs that you can work with is sage. I have to say, sage number one should be reserved for people who are of indigenous heritage and descent, because it is a close practice herb, um, and it is also endangered. So there are other herbs that you can use to get the same purifying or clarifying elements that we have with Aries energy, and typically that could be nettle, bay, or ginger. Some other scents that you can also work with either through aromatherapy, through incense, could be pine, geranium, and dragon's blood, because they are all associated with Aries. No, I forgot to change the slide, y'all. So sorry. And I don't know why I didn't give any update about the sun in Aries. So while we're here, let's talk about it. So with the sun being in Aries right now, some of the things that might come up that you might naturally be feeling if your sun is in Aries, or just because it's the collective energy right now, is really leaning into your adventurous spirit. So because a certain part of all portions of the zodiac will represent us, somewhere inside of you exists an adventurous spirit. And so during this time period, or if your moon is in Aries, you may be known for having a very strong adventurous spirit and or personality, where you're ready to take on action and you're ready to initiate action, and you're kind of ready just to see what the journey is all about. That's very normal during this time of year when it's Aries season. It's also very normal if you have your natal sun in Aries, right? Aries, as the warrior of the zodiac, is known for its protective nature. I know so many Aries, and listen, they don't play about who they don't play about. I have a Mars in Aries. I don't play about who I don't play about. And again, it's that warrior energy. It's being the bravest and the most courageous of the zodiac. And it really represents an individual's ability to be willing to defend themselves, the people they care about, their home, their belief system, to a very strong degree, to the degree of actually being action oriented, willing to do something about it, even if it means being physical, even if it means using its fire element. Right? Sun and Aries energy is very known for that. And it might be some of the energy that you might be experiencing right now. Is it being very protective over yourself, being very protective over your home, specifically with Mars being in Cancer right now, and being very protective over your family, and being very protective over the people who are closest to you right now, especially highlighting again that Mars in Cancer energy. Another thing that Aries sun is known for is being direct communicators. Aries people calls it like they see it. Right now, with the sun being in Aries, it being a new moon and a solar eclipse, a lot of people are calling it like they see it. And also, Mercury was in retrograde until it ingressed back into Pisces. So during this time period, it could be a time for telling the truth. It could be a time for uncovering uncomfortable truths, hidden truths, especially with Neptune moving into Aries. And it also represents a time where you might feel more free to give your opinion. So, overall, this might be your nature if your sun is in Aries, but it also could be how you're feeling right now over the course of 2 weeks, but especially today and the rest of the weekend as we're experiencing this new moon. And again, Aries, because of its initiating abilities, is known for being a natural leader, known for starting, known for being self oriented, and known for taking people along the way, never leaving the people that it wants to protect behind. Very much so, bringing those people along for the ride with them. And so Aries individuals are very much so known for being kind of flexible, but not really in a mutable way, in an initiating way, very speedy, more so doing before they're thinking everything already out. Because even though Mars energy also governs Scorpio, the Aries portion of it isn't really so strategic. So it's very much so known for doing before thinking, but also being at the top of all of their areas, because they are so strong, they are so courageous, they do have that initiating energy, and because they're fire, they do have the ability to stick it out, to stick it out and not fizzle out, which can kind of be unheard of when we're talking about kind of cardinal energy, right? So just wanted to highlight that since obviously I did make a slide for it. I guess this is the wrong presentation. Okay. And so, yeah, we've already talked about that. I guess some additional correspondences, like we talked about, is the ram. So, as we talked about, the ram represents Aries energy. And again, it represents just determination, directness, and courage. But also, the horns of the ram represents Aries' fiery nature and its personality, its ability to be able to be powerful, and the ability to be able to move things or push things through. In tarot, Aries energy is represented by the Emperor's energy. And so the Emperor represents authority, structure, and leadership and establishment to order. So since it is the first of the zodiac and the initiator of the zodiac, and it is fire energy, Aries energy is known for being very light filled and kind of bringing order out of chaos, out of Pisces one consciousness energy. So the Emperor card in tarot very much so represents that dynamic of Aries. As far as physical correspondence or portions of the body that Aries governs, again, it is the face, the head, and the brain are things. So during this time period, with the sun being in Aries, with there being a new moon in Aries, with Chiron being in Aries, is very much so a time to focus on your own identity, to focus on your mental activity, your mental health, your mental wellness, the things that impact your mental wellness also. And also just making sure that is spring. So some of the things that might impact your head and brain fog, like your allergies and staying hydrated and blowing your nose, you're taken care of. So just wanted to say that. And also Aries has lucky numbers. So the lucky numbers for Aries are 1 and 9. If you're in numerology, please look up 1 and 9. We are in a 9 year. Next year is a 1 year. We are in the story of completion. So we are very much so in Aries frequency energy right now, not only with this new moon and eclipse, but also because it is a 9 year. Okay. And the days of the week where you can most likely work with Aries energy is Tuesday. Tuesday is known as Mars Day historically, and it's a good time to work or hyper focus on Aries energy, especially next Tuesday as we're kind of coming out of all this heavy energy to kind of begin the process of integrating. Okay. Oh, so let's move on. We've already talked about the colors. We've already talked about the correspondences. So I don't know why it didn't include the plants in here, or it didn't include Aries retrograde. So I'm just going to continue for a couple of more minutes. So hang in there with me, y'all, as we get all of this done. Okay, so some of the plant correspondences, because I know that's what a lot of people are really here for, is work with honeysuckle if you can right now. Like we talked about geranium previously, you can also work with tiger lily during this time period. Also tulips and daffodils, they're coming up in my yard right now. Those are related to Aries and springtime, so those are very good herbs. And there's very good flowers to work with, put on your altar, dry down. If you have any dried herbs to do candle work with during this time period. Again, we talked about sage. Sage technically is represented by Aries energy, but again, it should only be used by people who are of indigenous descent and indigenous culture because it is a closed practice, and because it is endangered. But again, you can focus on other elements such as nettle, bay leaf, ginger. You can also focus on trees during this time period. Holly and chestnut are two trees that are governed by Aries and are very much so known for their protective qualities and their durable qualities, which will enhance that cardinal initiating energy in Aries and help the things that you're calling down stick, especially if you work with chestnut right now. Some of the other scents as far as aromatherapy or incense that you can work with are pine, wormwood, geranium, and dragon's blood. Now would be a good time, since it is also the astrological new year, to use wormwood oil in water and do a form of a detox or a form of a cleanse. It would be a very, very good time to do that. And some of the things I want you to think about now, more than ever, as we're starting a new astrological year, is to think about how you could utilize plant allies and the astrological wheel to help you in your holistic wellness for the rest of this year, for the rest of this 9 year. Okay. So that's something that I want us to think about more and more and more, and to also think about how we can incorporate more herbs and more plants into our ritual and our routine, especially as root workers, especially as conjurers, um, and especially as people who might just be energy workers and work with this and work with the spiritual implications of herbs. Okay. And like we talked about, Aries is in retrograde, or Mercury is in retrograde in Aries, y'all. And again, I do not know why this didn't show up. And Mercury, when it's in Aries, is known for its directness, its honesty, also its blunt communication. And during this current new moon, right? Mercury will be retrograde at actually 29 degrees and 24 minutes of Pisces. So it ingressed, as we talked about, out of Aries and went back into Pisces, which added an additional complex relationship with kind of everything that's going on right now. So, what's that complex relationship, and what are the energies that we are going to be focusing on? Right, when we're talking about how to work with Mercury's energy, with it being retrograde and it kind of being in that Aries Pisces cusp. And so, kind of think about, how do you express yourself when you're communicating freely or passionately? That's something that kind of walks on that cusp. That would be a very good question that you can answer today. Okay. And often think about, with that cusp being brought up, with Pisces energy representing one consciousness and Aries energy representing the ego to a certain degree, not necessarily like in Leo's energy, but more so in the house, the first house energy, the ascendant energy. Um, Also think about, what's that balance? What's that balance between being in communication and deep communication and community with yourself, right? Mercurial energy, and also others. And how do you balance that out to make sure that you achieve your life's purpose? Okay. Another thing with the um, kind of the debilitated state that Mars is in, please take your time, because now is a very good time, with Mercury being in retrograde in Pisces, to get very emotional and very angry very quick. Um, Mercury in Aries can be quick to anger. Mercury's in Pisces is not quick to anger, but when angry, will stay angry for a very long time until new energy comes and gets it out. It will give into that mutable nature, but that very deep water energy, being the depths of the ocean, the deepest part of the ocean, really represents that. Take a deep breath, be an observer, pay attention to your emotional reactivity and your emotional intelligence during this time period. Okay. Also, Venus is in retrograde, and yeah, it moved into Pisces, I think, yesterday at 4:44 a.m. And this will also be impacting our communication, and also impacting like our relationships, right? Because of everything that's going on. So during this time period where Venus was in Aries, but went back to 29 degrees and 24 minutes of Pisces, please pay attention when we're talking about the relationship with yourself and others, of kind of understanding, like, where are your direct qualities in your relationship, but then where are your passive or more mutable qualities in your relationship. And since we're working with that cusp between Pisces and Aries, it's kind of like you're working with the Libra Aries axis of making sure that you find balance between self love, time for self, time for life purpose, time for initiation and new experiences, and making sure that you are doing the work and being in community and loving on the people that you need to love on and they loving on you back. Also, with this energy, it's all about reciprocity. It's all about reciprocity. So, pouring into the people who pour into you and learning how to release and let go of the people who don't pour into you. Okay. I would also say another portion is just to think about places with this axis coming up where you've been too sacrificial of yourself, your needs, for others, and think about how it played out for you, especially while the South Node was in Libra, especially as we're closing out a lot of that nodal activity that took place between 2022 and January 2025. What does that mean? And what are the lessons that you learned? And now that we're shifting into different energies, how can you use that to make sure that you don't get out of balance? Or that if you are getting out of balance, you're aware and you have a plan to get yourself back on track. And finally, we have Neptune in Aries. So, in a couple of hours, Neptune will be moving into Aries until 2039. Neptune rules over the 12th house, it rules over Pisces energy. Yeah, and it's known for ruling over delusions, spirituality, dreams, intuition, and to a certain degree collective consciousness, right? So, what are some of the things that we will be focusing on over the next 14 years while Neptune is in Aries? Well, I'm glad you asked. One of the primary things that we were going to be focusing on is that shift of dissolving boundaries. So, a lot of times when Neptune is in Aries, we kind of have to lose our sense of self to gain our spirituality, right? But when Neptune goes into Aries, we kind of have to build up a sense of self. We kind of have to build up boundaries around a sense of self so that we turn what we've learned and the spiritual experiences into action orientation so that we can begin to call them down into this realm and be able to make a life's purpose out of it, be able to change the world, be able to complete our soul contracts around it, right? And so a lot of times, this might be time where you might be experiencing over the next 14 years the need to seek direct personal experiences rather than believing other people's experiences or kind of, that more esoteric, more spiritual, more dreamy element of spirituality. Now's the time to be very kind of direct, kind of very tactile in your own spiritual belief systems right now and making sure that you are calling down things into reality and making things out of them, right? And so a lot of times this will focus on visionary leadership. And what this means oftentimes is, again, Aries represents that natural leadership, it represents initiation. So it's all about where are you willing to be a spiritual pioneer and forge new ways of being, new ways of existing in spirituality and giving people a pathway to follow behind. So it's kind of like you're creating your own archetype or archetypical energy, which is very indicative of all the things that we know that Aries represents over time, right? But another element that we have to take into consideration, and that will really, really be heavy, is also that Chiron is in Aries. So you're going to be healing your inner warrior while you're looking to take that direct, inspired action and visionary leadership by self empowerment. And like we talked about, since Aries rules over the head, the first house, the face, and the brain. This is all about how you are fighting in your inner warrior and you are empowering yourself to have great, great boundaries and great standards around your mental health, around your psychology, around your personality, around what are your psychological triggers, around how you let stress get you off track, right? And about making sure that your feelings and your emotions never get in the way of you being productive. To make a very, very long story short, okay? And so now that we are coming to an end and we're kind of rounding everything out, number one, thank you for sticking it out through this whole entire new method as we're rolling things out. Number two, if you want the in depth information that I just presented to you, it is now in workbook form. As expressed at the beginning of this live, we now have a soft launch of our workbooks. So now every single solitary new moon and full moon will also have a workbook that has different exercises, different journal prompts, um, different correspondences that can get you right with working with the energy where you won't have to go out, you won't have to collect the energy, you won't have to or collect the information, then overlaid on top of the energy that you're naturally picking up on or calling down, right? Right? So just wanted to highlight that, and the information is in the chat and it's also in the description. Just copy and paste the link and it'll take you right there. You'll be able to buy it. For right now, the workbook is $10, but come tour season, it will be going up to its market rate value of $22 because we are a business and we do got to keep our ancestors and everybody else paid. Round cheer, while we are like, just learning how to work with the energy, learning how to make our lives better. But thank you for sticking around. Thank you for learning how to work with this eclipse energy. Please take the rest of this day to be very intentional about what you call down, about who you give access to your energy to. And yeah, I'll see y'all in a couple of weeks for the new moon and again, or for the full moon in Libra. And again, make sure y'all get this workbook so you can work with this eclipse. Happy new moon. Happy solar eclipse, y'all. Bye.